All right, so let's see if we can finish at 9.3 before Zoom crashes again. So we saw that in this last example, the discriminant worked out to be 0, which means that there's just one solution. So to summarize, what method should you use? In general, you should try factoring first. When it works, it's going to be the fastest way of getting the equation solved. On the other hand, don't spend too long on it, because if the equation doesn't, or if the polynomial doesn't factor at all, or is really difficult to factor, then you're going to be wasting your time. So spend a little time seeing if it will factor. If it does, great. If not, go on to something else. The something else, if it's in the format ax squared equal k, or ax minus h squared equals k, which is materially the same thing, use the square root property. So those are kind of the end of the completing the square, is using the square root property. So if it's in one of those two forms, just use the square root property. And then finally, remember that you can always use completing the square or the quadratic formula. Those two methods always work, unlike factoring, which depends on your ability to factor the polynomial. Completing the square and the quadratic formula always work. As to which one should you use, our book says to use the quadratic formula, but it's up to you, personal taste really. Some people like the quadratic formula because it's a recipe you can follow. I personally find it kind of boring, and the evaluations for the radicand sometimes end up with some fairly good sized numbers that I'd rather avoid. So again, up to you, but either way will work. Completing the square, quadratic formula, either one. All right, that takes us to the end of section 9.3. At this point, you can solve any quadratic equation you want using, at the very least, completing the square or the quadratic formula. So that's the end. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day.